The Great Sphinx of Giza, commonly referred to as the Sphinx, is a limestone statue of a reclining or couchant sphinx that stands on the Giza Plateau on the west bank of the Nile in Giza, Egypt. The face of the Sphinx is generally believed to represent the face of the pharaoh Khafre. It is the largest monolith statue in the world, standing 73.5 meters long, 19.3 meters wide, and 20.22 meters high. It is the oldest known monumental sculpture, and is commonly believed to have been built by ancient Egyptians of the Old Kingdom during the reign of the pharaoh Khafre. Construction. The Sphinx is a monolith carved down into the bedrock of the plateau, which also served as the quarry for the pyramids and other monuments in the area. Because of its geological history, the nummulitic limestone of the area consists of layers of widely differing quality, offering unequal resistance to erosion, mostly due to wind and wind-blown sand, which explains the uneven degradation of the body of the Sphinx. The floor of the Sphinx depression and lowest part of the body, including the legs, is solid, hard rock. Above this, the body of the lion up to its neck is a heterogeneous zone with friable layers that have suffered considerable disintegration. The layer in which the head was sculpted is also much harder. Origin and identity. The Great Sphinx is one of the world's largest and oldest statues, but basic facts about it are still subject to debate, such as when it was built, by whom, and for what purpose. These questions have resulted in the popular idea of the Riddle of the Sphinx, alluding to the original Greek legend of the Riddle of the Sphinx. Pliny the Elder mentioned the Great Sphinx in his book, Natural History, commenting that the Egyptians looked upon the statue as a divinity that has been passed over in silence, and that King Hermes was buried in it. Names of the Sphinx. It is not known by what name the creators called their statue, as the Great Sphinx does not appear in any known inscription of the Old Kingdom, and there are no inscriptions anywhere describing its construction or its original purpose. In the New Kingdom, the Sphinx was called Horemheb, and the pharaoh Thutmose IV specifically referred to it as such in his dream stela. The commonly used name Sphinx was given to it in classical antiquity, about 2,000 years after the commonly accepted date of its construction, by reference to a Greek mythological beast with a lion's body, a woman's head and the wings of an eagle. The English word sphinx comes from the ancient Greek sigma phi iota gamma chi, apparently from the verb sigma phi iota gamma gamma omega, after the Greek sphinx who strangled anyone who failed to answer her riddle. The name may alternatively be a linguistic corruption of the phonetically different ancient Egyptian word sspanx. This name is given to royal statues of the 4th dynasty of ancient Egypt, and later in the New Kingdom to the Great Sphinx. More specifically, medieval Arab writers, including al-Makrizi, called the Sphinx Balzibun Bilhor, which suggest a Coptic influence. The modern Egyptian Arabic name is builder and time frame, though there have been conflicting evidence and viewpoints over the years. The view held by modern Egyptology at large remains that the Great Sphinx was built in approximately 2500 BC for the pharaoh Khafre, the builder of the second pyramid at Giza. Selim Hassan, writing in 1949 on recent excavations of the Sphinx enclosure, summed up to the problem. Taking all things into consideration, it seems that we must give the credit of erecting this, the world's most wonderful statue, to Khafre, but always with this reservation, that there is not one single contemporary inscription which connects the Sphinx with Khafre. So sound as it may appear, we must treat the evidence as circumstantial, until such time as a lucky turn of the spade of the excavator will reveal to the world a definite reference to the erection of the Sphinx. The circumstantial evidence mentioned by Hassan includes the Sphinx's location in the context of the funerary complex surrounding the second pyramid, which is traditionally connected with Khafre. Apart from the causeway, the pyramid and the Sphinx, the complex also includes the Sphinx Temple and the Valley Temple, both of which display the same architectural style, with 200-ton stone blocks quarried out of the Sphinx enclosure. A diorite statue of Khafre, which was discovered buried upside down along with other debris in the Valley Temple, is claimed as support for the Khafre theory. The Dream Stela, erected much later by the pharaoh Thutmose IV, associates the Sphinx with Khafre. When the stela was discovered, its lines of text were already damaged and incomplete, and only referred to Khaf, not Khafre. An extract was translated, "Which we bring for him, oxen, and all the young vegetables, and we shall give praise to Wenofer." Khaf, the statue made for Atum or Emakit. The Egyptologist Thomas Young, finding the Khaf hieroglyphs in a damaged cartouche used to surround a royal name, inserted the glyph Ra to complete Khafre's name. When the stela was re-excavated in 1925, the lines of text referring to Khaf flaked off and were destroyed. Dissenting hypotheses. Theories held by academic Egyptologists regarding the builder of the Sphinx and the date of its construction are not universally accepted, and various persons have proposed various alternative hypotheses about both the builder and the dating. Early Egyptologists. Some of the early Egyptologists and excavators of the Giza pyramid complex believed the Great Sphinx and other structures in the Sphinx enclosure predated the traditional date of construction. In 1857, Auguste Mariette, founder of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, unearthed the much later inventory stela, which tells how Khafre came upon the Sphinx, already buried in sand. Although certain tracts on the stela are considered good evidence, this passage is widely dismissed as late-period historical revisionism. Gaston Maspero, the French Egyptologist and second director of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, conducted a survey of the Sphinx in 1886 and concluded, "The Sphinx stela shows, in line 13, the cartouche of Khafre. I believe that to indicate an excavation carried out by that prince, following which, the almost certain proof that the Sphinx was already buried in sand by the time of Khafre and his predecessors, i.e., Dynasty IV, 2575–2467 BC. In 1904, English Egyptologist E. A. Wallace Budd wrote in The Gods of the Egyptians, "This marvelous object, the Great Sphinx, was in existence in the days of Khafre, or Khafre, and it is probable that it is a very great deal older than his reign and that it dates from the end of the Archaic period, c. 2686 BC. Modern dissenting hypotheses. Rainer Stadelmann, former director of the German Archaeological Institute in Cairo, examined the distinct iconography of the Nemes and the now detached beard of the Sphinx and concluded that the style is more indicative of the pharaoh Khafre, builder of the Great Pyramid of Giza and Khafre's father. He supports this by suggesting that Khafre's causeway was built to conform to a pre-existing structure, which, he concludes, given its location, could only have been the Sphinx. Colin Reeder, an English geologist who independently conducted a more recent survey of the enclosure, agrees that the various quarries on the site have been excavated around the causeway. Because these quarries are known to have been used by Khafre, Reeder concludes that the causeway must predate Khafre, thereby casting doubt on the conventional Egyptian chronology. In 2004, Vasil Dobrov of the Institut Français d'Archéologie Orientale in Cairo announced that he had uncovered new evidence that the Great Sphinx may have been the work of the little-known pharaoh Djedefre, Khafre's half-brother and a son of Khafre. Dobrov suggests that Djedefre built the Sphinx in the image of his father Khafre, identifying him with the sun god Ra in order to restore respect for their dynasty. Dobrov also notes, like Stadelmann and others, that the causeway connecting Khafre's pyramid to the temples was built around the Sphinx, suggesting it was already in existence at the time. Fringe hypotheses. Orion correlation theory. The Orion correlation theory, as expounded by popular authors Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval, is based on the proposed exact correlation of the three pyramids at Giza with the three stars Zeta Ori, Epsilon Ori and Delta Ori, the stars forming Orion's belt, in the relative positions occupied by these stars. Indiana, 1050 BC. The authors argue that the geographic relationship of the Sphinx, the Giza pyramids and the Nile directly corresponds with Leo, Orion and the Milky Way respectively. Sometimes cited as an example of pseudo-archaeology, the theory is at variance with mainstream scholarship. Water erosion hypothesis. The Sphinx water erosion hypothesis contends that the main type of weathering evident on the enclosure walls of the Great Sphinx could only have been caused by prolonged and extensive rainfall, and that it must therefore predate the time of the pharaoh Khafre. The hypothesis is championed primarily by Robert M. Schoch, a geologist and associate professor of natural science at the College of General Studies at Boston University, and John Anthony West, an author and alternative Egyptologist. At the behest of West, Frank Domingo, a forensic scientist in the New York City Police Department and an expert forensic anthropologist, used detailed measurements of the Sphinx, forensic drawings and computer imaging to conclude that Khafre, as depicted on extant statuary, was not the model for the Sphinx's face. The Great Sphinx's Anubis. Author Robert K. G. Temple proposes that the Sphinx was originally a statue of the jackal dog Anubis, the god of the necropolis, and that its face was recarved in the likeness of a Middle Kingdom pharaoh, Amenemhet II. Temple bases his identification on the style of the eye makeup and the style of the pleats on the headdress. Racial characteristics. Over the years, several authors have commented on what they perceive as negroid characteristics in the face of the Sphinx. This issue has become part of the ancient Egyptian race controversy. With respect to the ancient population as a whole, the face of the Sphinx has been damaged over the millennia. Medical analysis. Surgeon Hutan Ashrafian from Imperial College London has analysed the Sphinx to identify that it may have represented an individual suffering from prognathism, which may have been a reflection of a disease suffered by the sculpture's human inspiration. Furthermore, as the Sphinx represented a lion, the same person may have suffered from an associated condition where lion-like features were apparent. Restoration. After the Giza necropolis was abandoned, the Sphinx became buried up to its shoulders in sand. The first documented attempt at an excavation dates to c. 1400 BC, when the young Thutmose IV gathered a team in, after much effort, managed to dig out the front paws, between which he placed a granite slab, known as the Dream Stela, inscribed with the following: "The royal son, Thothmose, being arrived while walking at midday and seating himself under the shadow of this mighty god, was overcome by slumber and slept to the very moment when Ra is at the summit of heaven. He found that the majesty of this august god spoke to him with his own mouth, as a father speaks to his son, saying, 'Look upon me, contemplate me, O my son Thothmose, I am thy father. Harmakas Kopri Ratum, I bestow upon thee the sovereignty over my domain, the supremacy over the living. Behold my actual condition, that thou mayest protect all my perfect limbs. The sand of the desert whereon I am laid has covered me. Save me, causing all that is in my heart to be executed.'" Later, Rameses II the Great may have undertaken a second excavation. Mark Lenner, an Egyptologist, originally asserted that there had been a far earlier renovation during the Old Kingdom, although he has subsequently recanted this heretical viewpoint. In AD 1817, the first modern archaeological dig, supervised by the Italian captain Giovanni Battista Caviglia, uncovered the Sphinx's chest completely. The entire Sphinx was finally excavated in 1925 to 1936, in digs led by Émile Barrès. In 1931, engineers of the Egyptian government repaired the head of the Sphinx because part of its headdress had fallen off in 1926 due to erosion, which had also cut deeply into its neck, missing nose and beard. The 1-meter-wide nose on the face is missing. Examination of the Sphinx's face shows that long rods or chisels were hammered into the nose, one down from the bridge and one beneath the nostril, then used to pry the nose off towards the south. The Arab historian al-Makrezi, writing in the 15th century, attributes the loss of the nose to iconoclasm by Muhammad Sohim al-Dar, a Sufi Muslim from the Khankar of Said al-Suwada. In AD 1378, upon finding the local peasants making offerings to the Sphinx in the hope of increasing their harvest, Sohim al-Dar was so outraged that he destroyed the nose, and was hanged for vandalism. Al-Makrezi describes the Sphinx as the talisman of the Nile, on which the locals believed the flood cycle depended. There is also a story that the nose was broken off by a cannonball fired by Napoleon's soldiers, that still lives on today. Other variants indict British troops, the Mamluks, and others. Sketches of the Sphinx by the Dane Frederick Lewis Norton, made in 1738 and published in 1757, show the Sphinx missing its nose. This predates Napoleon's birth in 1769. In addition to the lost nose, a ceremonial pharaonic beard is thought to have been attached, although this may have been added in later periods after the original construction. Egyptologist Vasil Dobrev has suggested that had the beard been an original part of the Sphinx, it would have damaged the chin of the statue upon falling. The lack of visible damage supports his theory that the beard was a later addition. Mythology. Colin Reeder has proposed that the Sphinx was probably the focus of solar worship in the early dynastic period, before the Giza Plateau became a necropolis in the Old Kingdom. He ties this in with his conclusions that the Sphinx Temple, the causeway and the Khafre mortuary temple are all part of a complex which predates Dynasty IV. The lion has long been a symbol associated with the sun in ancient Near Eastern civilizations. Images depicting the Egyptian king in the form of a lion smiting his enemies date as far back as the early dynastic period. In the New Kingdom, the Sphinx became more specifically associated with the god Hor-Makhet, or Horus at the horizon, which represented the pharaoh in his role as the Sheshepunk of the god Atum. Pharaoh Amenhotep II built a temple to the northeast of the Sphinx nearly 1,000 years after its construction, and dedicated it to the cult of Hor-Makhet.